what's up, Liquid Church? How y'all doing? All right. I want to say Happy New Year, and I want to wish all of our campuses watching throughout the state of New Jersey Happy New Year on three. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy New Year! All right. It is exciting, and for our new year, we're kicking off a brand new series called Simplify, right? Because, when we think of New Year's, we think of new us, new year, new start, right? Let me ask you this. How many of you are resolution people? Who's got some resolutions you've set? Awesome. How many of you have broken them already? Okay, just as many of you. That's amazing, right? Because we look at the new year as a kind of a break to begin new things, and usually some of us, we make goals around health, right? Especially like around the gym. And if you are part of a gym, you know that December 31st, the gym looks like this. It's a ghost town, right? No one is there. But then something magical happens on January 1st. It becomes this, right? And literally, the workout is actually getting into the gym, not just doing your normal workouts, right? But we all want to be better. We want to improve. We want to be better than we did the year before. And so we make a lot of goals. We make a lot of resolutions so we can do that. And usually they're around new behaviors, right? We want to lose more weight or exercise more or change our habits. Maybe we want to stop smoking, stop drinking as much. And we make all these things. We never see the change that we're hoping to. And the reason is because a lot of these changes are at the surface level, the behavior level. We'd rather modify our behavior, but really there's a deeper change that needs to take place, and we need to understand and realize that the reason some of those changes don't happen is because our lives are cluttered. There is just all sorts of stuff that we have in our cluttered lives just kind of keep us from being the people that we want to be, the people that God has called us to be, and often we need to actually go deeper to kind of uncover some of that stuff so that we can move forward. And a reason for that, for some of this, is that this clutter actually really just depletes our energy and kind of makes us feel exhausted. And if you're kind of wondering, is my life cluttered right now? Maybe you need some tests. So I got 3 tests for you. If you have said any of these 3 I feel statements, then your life is probably cluttered. How many of you said, I feel exhausted? Any of you said this? Okay, a couple of you. Okay. How about this all across our campus? How many of you have said, I feel overscheduled? Okay. All right, definitely a bunch of you have felt that way. Or how about this? How many are like, I feel overwhelmed? It's like there's so much on my plate. And if you've said any of these statements or if they resonate with you, most likely you've got a cluttered life. But that shouldn't surprise any of us, right? Think of all the priorities we have to balance. The priorities with our family, the priorities at work, the priorities at church. We have all these different things. They're kind of constantly pulling at our schedule that we're wondering, how do we make any of these things happen? But then there's the unplanned stuff, right? The stuff that we weren't expecting to happen and then just kind of happens. Like we go through a season of unemployment. Maybe you're beginning 2017 without a job. And now your focus is to get a job. Or you've realized, you know what? I've been struggling in my marriage. And we've been kind of pushing through it over. And we're hoping to maybe deal with it in the new year rather than during the holidays when it's crazy. Well, the new year's here and those same issues are still there. Or for some of you, I know that you've got a new baby. You went from 2 to 3. And now you're trying to figure out how do we handle these new pressures and these new rhythms and these routines? This kid just seems to be sucking the life out of us. How do we do this? Or maybe you're experiencing the emotional clutter of you've been trying to have a baby and it just doesn't seem to be happening. It doesn't seem to be working out the way you were hoping. And the clutter's there. Or you've got the demands of aging parents. You're now their caregiver. But then you also have got your kids that you're taking care of as well, and you're kind of stuck in the middle, and you've got your parents' health concerns and their whole kind of repertoire of things, as well as your own health issues. For some of you, the doctor called and you sent their message straight to voicemail because you didn't want to deal with it. You see, we have all this clutter that's in our lives. All this stuff that kind of occupies our mind and our hearts. It's kind of keeping us, tethered in many ways to some bad habits and patterns. I wonder, are we ever going to break it? And we often tell ourselves, I'm going to do better this year, right? I'm going to do less. I'm going to cut stuff out. I'm going to manage my time better. I'm going to be more on top of things. I'm going to get more stuff done. But maybe we need to kind of look at it differently. What if simplifying our lives isn't about doing less? What if it's about doing the right things and focusing on the right areas? There's a pastor out in Chicago. His name is Bill Hybels, and he wrote a book called Simplified. And in the book, he kind of talks about this idea of kind of simplifying our lives and focusing in more and uncluttering our souls. And he's got this great quote of how he defines a simplified life. He says this: simplified living is about more than doing less. It's being who God called us to be with a wholehearted, single-minded focus. It's walking away from innumerable lesser opportunities in favor of the few, to which we've been called and for which we've been created for. Did you catch what he said there? It's not about doing less. It's about doing the right things. It's doing the things that you were made to do, that you were created to do. In fact, the way I would define simplified living is this. It's doing the things only you can do. Because there's lots of things in your daily life that other people can do. But I think of my own life, no one else can parent my kids except for me. I'm the only dad for Selah and Wesley. I'm the only husband for Jackie. You're the only husband or wife or son or daughter. It's just you. There's certain things only you can do that you were made to do. And so there's some things that actually God may actually want you to stop doing in order that you can make some space to start doing new things. And so that's what we're going to tackle with this series, Simplify. We're going to be looking at how do we streamline our calendars with focused precision? How do we handle our finances so that we can be good stewards of what God has given us? How can we steward the relationships in our lives and countless other things? But I want to kind of broaden the question today to kind of look at the 50,000-foot view. I want to ask you this question. How full is your bucket? How full is your bucket? Now, in your notes, I want you to go ahead, open it up, and draw a bucket. And if you're kind of like me, artistically challenged, I'm going to coach you on how to draw a bucket. So go ahead and make an oval. And this is like stuff you should have learned in kindergarten. So, go ahead. Nice oval right here. Perfect. And you got an oval? Awesome. Now, give it some legs, right? Give your oval some legs. And then you connect the bottom lines here with a nice smile here. There you go. And guess what? You have made a bucket. You're Picasso. I can tell. You've got skills, mad skills. I want you to imagine that this bucket is your life, and it actually contains your energy level, right? Like your energy level is kind of held in this bucket. And so why don't you go ahead and on that bucket, why don't you mark where your energy level is at right now, maybe in the season of life, or maybe how you feel right now in this room. And so maybe right now, your energy level is really low. It's like, the kids had you up since 3 a.m. You are just emotionally drained. You've got nothing left. You're low. Or maybe, you know what, you're feeling good. You had some coffee. It's coursing through your veins a little bit. So your level's more of like a medium, right? You're good to go. But maybe you're just on fire. You're burning everything up. You are high energy, high octane, nonstop, ready to go. In fact, maybe you're like overflowing. Your bucket is so full, it's actually spilling out on other people. And you've got all this energy that you can kind of give to other people. Imagine that you're over here, you're kind of high, you've got lots of energy. When your bucket is full, what's it feel like? See, when my bucket is full, I feel close to God. When my bucket is full, I love my spouse and my kids really well. When my bucket is full, I can love people that are hard to love, like Patriots fans, right? When my bucket is full, I make better choices with my food. I make better choices with the things I do, with exercise and diet and all those things, and my soul feels good. When my bucket is full, all those things happen. But what about when my bucket is low? When my bucket is empty? Well, I can tell you right now that when my bucket is empty, I feel far from God. When my bucket is empty, I am easily irritated by my spouse and my kids. When my bucket is empty, I overeat, I overspend. When my bucket is empty, I escape, whether it's into movies or social media or I binge on Netflix. When my bucket is empty, I'll turn to sin to escape the boredom. And often this is where we found ourselves trapped by pornography because we don't have the emotional reserves or the emotional energy to resist. See, the problem with our energy bucket is there's actually holes in our bucket. And so we are leaking. Our energy is constantly kind of coming out of us. In fact, imagine you start off your day with lots of energy. You're ready to go. Then you have a conversation with your boss, and it brings your level down to medium. Then you go and pick up your kids, and they're fighting with each other, and they're pushing all your buttons, and now your energy level is lower. And then you come home, and you see your spouse, and they say something that, you don't really like, and then you've lost it, and it's all gone. You see, that's just kind of part of it, is we need to find ways to replenish our bucket and build rhythms of replenishment into our lives. That's how God has made us so that we can continue to be who God has made us to be. In fact, we see a great model of how to do this in the life of Jesus. Jesus was someone who knew how to replenish his bucket all the time. Now, before you start to tell me, well, wait a minute. Nathan, Jesus is God. He was always connected to the divine. He always had that connection to God. But just remember that the scriptures teach that Jesus is 100% God. He's also 100% man. So Jesus felt hunger, thirst, and tired. And he needed to replenish his bucket on a regular basis. And we see this all throughout the scriptures. Example of Jesus getting away and eating and taking a nap and all these things. In fact, we're going to look at one such example found in Mark chapter 1, 29 to 39. In fact, if you have a Bible, I want to encourage you to open that up or on your app or whatever it may be. We're going to go to Mark chapter 1, 29 to 39. And we're going to see how Jesus replenishes his bucket. It's going to be a great model for us to imitate as well. As you're getting set up there, let me give you a little bit of background on what's going on in this situation. Now, Mark is a gospel. It's a biography about Jesus. And what's really great about Mark is it's short. It's only 16 chapters. You can read it in 30 minutes and really gives you a lot of insight into Jesus. And it's fast-paced, so there's always scene changes and new characters. It kind of moves pretty quick. And it really kind of, at a large kind of a picture, it really talks about the power of Jesus over evil and even over some of the craziness that's in our lives. And so in this one scene that we're about to read, Jesus has just had this encounter with the Pharisees or the religious leaders where Jesus has cast out a demon and they're having a problem with it. And so Jesus has just had this confrontation with the Pharisees. So he needs to kind of replenish his bucket. And so he's kind of gotten away from them and he's going to kind of relax a little bit. And so it says this here, that as soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. So kind of here's the situation here, is that Jesus has just had this encounter with the Pharisees. He's tired. Him and his buddies go to hang out, and they're over at Simon's house. And Simon's mom isn't feeling well. And so Jesus takes this moment to actually go and heal her. So he kind of lifts her up, and the fever's gone. It's interesting that when Jesus took time to care for himself, he was able to take care of those closest to him and make them a priority. He had that capacity there when he was able to take care of himself and replenish his own bucket. And so as this is happening, people hear about it, and it starts to get viral. In fact, it says this, that evening, after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. So this is incredible. Jesus literally goes viral. Like literally, he heals Simon's mother. More people hear about it, and then more people hear about it, and then more people hear about it. And so they're bringing their sick and their demonized and all these people there because they want them to have this encounter with Jesus. I mean, can you imagine God doing something that incredible? Like those of you over at Essex County, imagine this, that you have such an incredible service, amazing worship. Pastor Jason and the spiritual care team are so effective at praying for people that literally the entire town of Nutley hears about it, and they start showing up at your door. They show up there, and right when you're about to leave, everyone, the entire town is right there. They're like, we want prayer from Pastor Jason. We want prayer from the spiritual care team. You're like, that's a revival. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus, right? That's awesome, right? That would be incredible. And so as this is going on, Jesus literally, from the moment that day began, he's ministering to people. Then when he's trying to relax, at night, people are still coming. They still want ministry. They still want prayer. They still want to share with Jesus their problems. So Jesus is ministering to these folks way into the night. How do you think Jesus feels? The man side of him is probably exhausted, just completely drained and tapped out of all energy. Like, I know how I feel, after preaching 3 services and then connecting with people and just kind of hearing people's hearts where they're at. By the end of the day, I'm done. I've got nothing left. It feels like I got hit by a truck. And so I look at Jesus, who's still cranking at this. He's still going. Where is he getting the energy and the power? Well, watch this. It says here that very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up. He left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." See, before Jesus did anything, he needed to be with God. He needed just kind of to soak in and just kind of be with his Father, hear his Father's voice, and have that connection. And when he was able to have that connection, he was able to be free. He was able to have that power source. And while Jesus is kind of experiencing this replenishment, his disciples are looking for him. They're like, Where'd Jesus go? I don't know, but there's more people here. What do we do? I don't know. Let's go find Jesus. So they're looking for Jesus. They're trying to find him. It's like, where's Waldo with Jesus, right? They're looking for him, and they finally find him in this kind of quiet spot, just kind of soaking in his time with the Father. And they're like, Jesus, where are you at? There's a mega church that's forming at my house. You got to come to this. This is going to be awesome. And I love Jesus' response. He says this. Jesus replied, let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I've come. So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. Can you imagine how the disciples felt? Jesus, there is so much to get done here. We're being so effective. So much is happening. Why do you want to leave? What are you thinking? Because Jesus essentially said to them, it's not my mission to stay here. I have to do what only I can do. I need to preach the gospel. And so I need to go to the next village and the village after that, because that's what I'm here for. See, Jesus wasn't after doing just good things. He wanted to do the best things with his time on earth because he knew it was so short. And oftentimes, to do the best means that we have to say no to the demands and the expectations of others. I mean, have you ever thought about this? Like, much time do you and I spend doing stuff that others demand of us rather than the things that only we can do? Because Jesus made it a priority to slow down and be with God, he could get his marching orders from the Father. He wasn't as influenced by other people. He knew to do what God had called him to do. But isn't it easy, especially in the midst of success when everything's going, to kind of keep going with it, right? To keep performing, to keep achieving, to keep pushing and going. Even if it's the wrong thing, it's the wrong priority. It's not something that's life-giving because it's intoxicating, right? Especially if you've experienced success, it feels good and we want to keep doing it. But the problem is it depletes our energy and can lead us to some places we may not want to go to. In fact, that's one of the things that Jory was learning. Jory is a mom of 3 beautiful girls, and she's busy, and she's always going. She's lived this fast-paced life, but she's learning how to slow down, and she's realizing that it's really for her, not only her best, but for the best of others. Let's watch her story together.
I view my life right now is that I'm living in 15-minute increments. And I get through this 15, and then it's the next 15, and it's the next 15. And that's not a healthy way to live, and it's not a great way to live, and it's not really even a good way to live. However, it's the only way right now to kind of survive. With my husband traveling every single week for work, and I'm working full-time, which includes nights and weekends, and 3 kids who are not babies anymore, who don't just go to bed at 6:37. We wait for all the schedules come out for competition for our kids and classes. And I start to see what is that going to look like? Where are the holes? Who's going to have to help? What babysitter am I going to need? How am I going to be able to create something that is manageable for everybody? So really their lives kind of dictate kind of what I'm doing. And then when I see that, I say, okay, well, these are nights that I can't do coverage at work. And then I have to look at my husband's schedule. You know, he's traveling. He's an elder at our church, and that has its own responsibilities, and so I have to look at his schedule, and I have to see when is he in meetings, when does he need space, when is he doing things that he needs to do for his serving, and all of that creates a picture that usually says, this is how we're gonna survive. It's really, really hard, because I wanna do it, and I wanna do it perfectly, but what happens is, you know, after the 7th drop off and pick up and they're still not in bed and everyone needs a shower and they're eating and you look at the clock and it's 9:53 and you're just still doing it every bedtime, every prayer, every lunch, every dinner, everything. It's completely exhausting. But I didn't want to admit to myself that it's something that felt stressful. And I think the tension really for me in my life is that I enjoy doing it. I enjoy being packed. I think the busyness of our lives is really hard on our girls. Brian is in a different state Sunday night to Wednesday night or Thursday, and the girls will say stuff like, oh, I wish Daddy was back, or oh, it's time for you to go. You know, it's hard on them. There's not a lot of downtime. I covet it, I want it, but other than that, right now, there's not a whole lot of margin to do anything, and hope that the next season will be better. Kind of my weakness and my need for control in achieving and busyness and all that. My daughter, it's just been revealed that she has very severe ADHD and panic and anxiety. And that whole world has been very suffocating, and it's very out of control. It feels like God has used this child to really say, you're not in control, and you have to slow it down because you can't keep taking more on and more on and more on and more on. And the trigger at this point is really seeing the effect on all this on a child who really needs a lot of routine. She really needs the noise quieted in her life. And me seeing that through her, like, okay, I can't do every single little tiny little thing. I need to ask for more help. I think that I would have kept going and building and achieving and doing, but really it took a sick child for God to get my attention, to slow it down.
Did you catch that? I love what Jory said. She said, the tension I feel is it's really hard because I love having a packed schedule. I love going. I love having all this stuff going on all the time. And I think many of us do, right? Because there's something about busyness that feels validating, isn't it? It's like if I'm busy, it means I'm important. It means that I'm doing something great. But the problem is that nonstop busyness depletes us. It takes our energy out from us. And it's often not us who suffers the most, but those closest to us and around us that really experience that. How can we build rhythms of replenishment into our lives so that we're not just completely empty, but we're constantly refreshing, constantly refilling? Our bucket is always full to the top. Well, I want to look at the life of Jesus because I think Jesus shows us 4 core ways to replenish our, what I call the core 4 rhythms of replenishment. So if you're taking notes, the first rhythm is this: it's to connect to God. To connect to God. And again, we see Jesus model this really well. In verse 35, it says this. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, he left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Even though Jesus is the Son of God, he understood that he needed to connect to God still. And he needed to have that connection because there is no greater bucket filler than when we are in connection to God. In fact, I love what the theologian Augustine said. He says this, that our hearts are restless until we find rest in God. And I know that when I'm in a specifically really busy season, there's nothing that really fills my bucket up till about 75% full than when I'm spending time with the Lord, when I'm in the Word, when I'm praying with Him, and I'm listening to His voice. Because what happens is that when I'm connected to God, I can sense His presence, and I can hear His voice, and I am more responsive to His Spirit, and I can do the things that He's called me to do, even if some of those things seem kind of crazy. I remember years ago, I was driving and I had gotten lost, which happens often. And so I'm lost somewhere in New York State, and I pull over to this one gas station. I ask this guy for directions, and he's giving me directions. And while we're having this conversation, I feel like the Lord is whispering to me, share the gospel with him. I'm thinking, what? That's crazy, God. Like there's all these different pieces to that. I don't even know how to bring that up into the conversation, but I've kind of learned at that point, okay, maybe I should just see where this conversation goes. So I said, all right, God, you're in charge. You have to make an opening for me. And while we're kind of talking, I said, thank you so much for giving me directions. He's like, directions? No problem. In fact, I wish I had some more direction in my life. I was like, bingo! There's my way in. And so from there, I just said, well, tell me about that. Like, what do you mean by that? And we were able to have a great conversation. And I shared with him the gospel. And it was amazing to hear him actually respond to the gospel. And he gave his life to the Lord. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. But that's when I realized that when I'm in connection to Jesus, I can actually start to see God at work in my life and in the lives of other people. See, when my bucket is full, I have actually margin to hear from God. When my bucket is full, I can see the opportunities that God brings my way. And when my bucket is full, I have the time to help other people. You see, I think all of us, we want to connect to God better in the new year. We want to be able to hear his voice and sense where he's opening up opportunities for us and do his will. But it's also about creating that intentionality and being able to do that. Often when we first wake up, the first thing we do is we go to our nightstand and we grab our cell phone, right? I know for many of us, we look through our social media, we check our email, we just start jumping right into the day. But what if we kept that same practice of grabbing our phone in our nightstand, but we opened up the scriptures and started to learn how to hear God speak to us? One of the things that I love about, our modern age is there's all these great apps that you can use to read the Bible. In fact, there's 2 great apps that we use. One is YouVersion, the other one's Our Daily Bread. And what I love about these 2 apps is they actually have Bible reading plans. So if you're going, I don't know how to read the Bible, I don't know where to start, perfect. These apps can help you learn how to do that. In fact, my wife loves using Our Daily Bread. She kind of goes through that the first thing she does in the morning and ends up being a real refresher to her. It feeds her soul. It helps her sense and be aware of what God is doing around her and in her midst. I want to encourage you, 2017, you want to put some rhythms of replenishment in your life? Begin by connecting to God. It's going to have some huge impacts in your life. The second is to connect to relationships. To connect to relationships. And we see Jesus doing this in verse 29. It says this, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. So Jesus had already been having a stressful, draining day. So what does he do? He kicks back with his squad, right? He goes and hangs out with James and John and Simon and his family because there's something restorative about being with people that can do that. And I know that for me, like one of the group of people that really helps me kind of fill up my bucket is when I'm with my family. Like I love hanging out with my wife and my kids. You know, we go to the Turtleback Zoo or the aquarium. We go on these adventures. There's nothing that can be more replenishing when I can just spend time with them. But also, if I'm really honest, my kids are really little. And there's times when it's not so replenishing, around 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they still haven't gone to bed. You're like, what is going on, right? And then my bucket is drained completely, right? But there's a sense, though, where they also refresh me. But I need more than simply my kids and my family. I also have people in my life that I can go to when, just to kind of for my own kind of sharpening my own growth. For instance, there's my friend Jimmy. Jimmy's a guy that I have known since high school. We go way, way back. He's a pastor down in South Jersey, and every other week, Jimmy and I connect, and we talk about just the struggles we're having in our life, the good points, the bad points, the things that are going great, what God's saying into our lives, the things that we need to work on, and we're able to encourage one another. We're able to challenge one another, and this friendship has really been a source of great, great growth in my life, and I really am appreciative for it. Because if I didn't have Jimmy in my life, I don't know where I'd be. He really has a way of filling my bucket to a point where I just have the emotional reserves I can really love other people. You see, as Christ followers, we need people in our lives. That's the only way we can grow in our own faith and also that we can replenish our bucket. Even if you're an introvert and you need only one person, you need that person who can refill your bucket. That's why here at Liquid Church, we prioritize groups. We know that when you're in a group of other Christ followers and you're discussing and doing life together and how this interacts with the scriptures, it can be a powerful way to grow your faith and help you really see God move in dynamic ways through those relationships. In fact, if you're looking to get involved in a group, this is the month to do it. We're going to have an opportunity for you to join the winter semester of our groups and really help get connected, and it's going to be a great way for you to replenish in 2017. If your goal is to have a life and have rhythms of replenishment, connect to God through His Word, connect to relationships, get in a group if you're not in one already, and the third key is to connect to satisfying work. To connect to satisfying work. And again, we see Jesus modeling this for us, where it says this, let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come. See, Jesus had connected to his why. He had come to earth to bring salvation, to seek and save those that were lost, those that were far away, those that were not connected to God. And so he knew that, you know what, as great as things are over here, they've heard the word, but I need to move on and go to the next one. So for many of us, when we think of our jobs, is okay, am I doing the job of my dreams? Is this giving me satisfaction? For some of us, we can say, yeah, absolutely. I'm doing the job of my dreams, and it is life-giving. But I know for many of us, our job's a paycheck. It's able to help us survive. It's able to help us get through the day. And so for many of us, we need to find satisfying work in other places and in other venues. I remember I was down at in Liquid Family, and I was chatting to some of our volunteers, and I met this guy named John Carino. And John's a great guy, and I just went up to him and said, John, can you just want to say thank you so much for serving? He's a middle school coach, right? He's always with the middle schoolers and all the time. And I go, thank you so much for serving. It's such a blessing to our kids and to us. He goes, are you kidding me? I'm excited that I get to do this. This is the best part of my week. And the other day I was on John's Facebook, and I was looking through his stuff there, and he said that one of his jobs is a servant at Liquid Church. For John, satisfying work isn't just what he does during the day. And he's a pretty successful lawyer, but for him, it's being here on a Sunday morning with middle schoolers. That's his satisfying work. That's what gives him life. That's what he wakes up for. So you may be here and you're thinking, I don't have a job that satisfies me, but what is it that God has called you to do that only you can do? When you are focusing and dialing in on that and living that out, that is satisfying work. And it's replenishing and refilling. Again, You want to have some core disciplines of refreshment this year? So connect to God. Make that a priority. Connect to relationships. Get in a group. Connect to satisfying work. And if it's not something that you're doing currently, get involved and serve, because you're going to find places where you can have some satisfying ways to connect. And the final core rhythm here is connect to recreation. Connect to recreation. If you look at the word recreation, there's actually two words in here. There's which means to do something again, and creation, which is to make, to do, to kind of bring something to life again. And what recreation does, it actually restores us and enables us to kind of come back to life a little bit. Not only is, and when we talk about restoration, oftentimes it means we need to take care of ourselves. Good diet and exercise, those things are important. The scriptures say that the body is actually the temple of the what? The Holy Spirit. Yeah, the Spirit of God lives in us, so we take care of our bodies. We're able to recharge ourselves and actually take care of the things that God has called us to. And not only does taking care of our bodies bring restoration, it actually enables us to actually do all the spiritual activities that God's called us to do. In fact, sometimes, especially when I'm going through a really busy season, the most spiritual thing I can do is take a nap. That's how restoration comes back into my life. I remember years ago when we had our first child, our schedule was crazy. We were up at night, sleep during the day. We were literally pumping an IV full of coffee all the time because it was just nonstop craziness, right? When you have your first kid, some of you know what that's like. It's just your whole life gets turned upside down. And I'd always wake up just in time to get to work late, right? So I'd get up and get to work late, and it just would be nonstop. And eventually, when our first child was able to finally, sleep throughout the night, I just realized I had to do something different. I was a little overweight, and so what I did was I woke up 15 minutes earlier and just exercised a little bit more. I started kind of taking care of my body and started kind of making some changes there, and it made a huge difference. I had energy I didn't even know that I had access to when I was able to do that, because I was taking the time to recreate myself, taking care of my body and my mind and my soul through recreation. See, replenishing our bucket, it's not something that's just an afterthought. It's actually something that's incredibly important to fulfill the destiny that God has called us to do and to be the people that God has called us to be. And that only happens when we make it a priority above all other things. Maybe you're asking, how do I do that? How do I take those steps to make it a priority? I want to close with this demonstration to kind of show us how do we prioritize the best in our lives. Now, I want you to imagine that your life's this bucket, this glass bucket here. And so in here I've got a container of sand. And, the sand is kind of, the small granular stuff in our life. Like you've got cell phone calls to make, email, social media, Facebook, Plants vs. Zombies. You got to get really, really good at that. It's all this stuff, the little things, right? The tyranny of the urgent, like the fires that need to take place, all that kind of crazy stuff that we have in our lives, right? And so that's the stuff that kind of ends up taking up most of our time, right? Like all those little things, the text messages, things like that. And then I've got these medium-sized rocks. And these are the things where, we have to eventually get a hold of them, take care of them. Otherwise, there's consequences. Like we got to take care of our cars, and we got to get haircuts, and we got to, do all these things. We've got reports to do at work. We've got all sorts of things that we need to kind of get done during the day. And if we don't get them done, it can be problematic. But then these big rocks are our major priorities, right? Connecting to God ends up in here. Oh, connecting to others, that's sort of important, right? Or, oh yeah, I also need to connect to satisfying work. That's an important priority as well. And then, oh yeah, I need to connect to recreation. You see, when we end up prioritizing our lives by the urgent, the little things, what happens is, our lives get shaky, right? Things start to go crazy. And then all of a sudden, what are the first things that fall? The major priorities are the first things that fall out of our schedule, right? When things get busy. But what if we decided early on to say, you know what, in 2017, I'm going to start differently. I'm going to start with the big rocks first. So I'm going to make a commitment to connect to God regularly every day first. I'm going to make a commitment to connect to relationships first with other people that are going to build me up and bring me life and energy. I'm going to make a connection and make a priority to connect this work that satisfies me. Maybe it's not my job, but it's going to be a place where I serve and I can invest in. And I'm going to actually take care to recreate. I'm going to take care of my body and my mind and my soul and hobbies and things that are going to make me feel alive, right? Because then we have all the other stuff, right? Okay, I got to take care of my job and all that other stuff. And then there's all the small things, right? All the little things that end up taking up our time. And what you find is when you put the big rocks of the major priorities first, you've got room for it all. This is the life that God's called you to live. When you start with the big rocks, when you start with what's important, it'll sustain you to do the other stuff. That's who you were made to be. So what's it look like for you in 2017 to reprioritize, to make some changes? See, if simplified living is doing the things only you can do, how can you begin to start moving things around so you can do those things first? For some of you, you're going to say, you know what, my goal this year is going to be to put God first. For some of you, it's like, all right, I'm going to get into a group. Now's my time to do that. And maybe for some of you, you need to find some ways that you can serve that are going to be satisfying to you, and they're going to help you make those connections. Whatever it is, what God wants to do in your life is he wants you to be fully alive. He wants you to kind of live to the full, to be the man or the woman that he has made you to be. In order to do that, it's time to simplify, to focus and do what only God has made you to do. Make 2017 a year of replenishment. Amen? Amen. Let me pray for you. Father God, I just want to thank you so much that, God, you did not come just to save our souls so that the rest of our lives on earth are just these crazy, hairy times. But you've come to save our entire selves, our body, our mind, our spirits, our schedules. You've come that we may have a single, wholehearted focus to do what you have made us to do. And so, Father, would you show that to us, God? Would you help us steward well the things that you've placed on our plate? And God, would you help us to focus and do what only you have called us to do? Ultimately, we all have that same calling, which is to love you with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love others. Would you show us how to do that practically day in and day out? In Jesus' name, amen.